Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for tonight's episode of Docs Physician's Own Call, a part of Hippocrates Docs, Just One Thing for Health. We are very happy to have Dr. Kathi McCree here with us tonight. She's from Webster, Texas, and she is going to talk about how you can cook without oil, the health benefits of eliminating oil from our diet. So, Dr. McCree, please tell us about yourself.
I'm Dr. Kathi McCree. I am practicing in Webster. I've been practicing in Webster for about 32 years with minor segues to League City, Texas City, LaPorte, probably another place that I can't remember. And I have a desire to educate my patients and pretty much anyone else I know about learning to cook in new ways that are much healthier. So for today, my focus is actually on cooking oil-free. I am able to answer questions. I'm able to just give you a lot of information. The people that are listening may not need any of this information. You guys could probably teach me a few tricks, but that's what our focus is tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. McCree. We appreciate your video this week. And in that, you talked about how to cook without oil. But let's back up a little bit and hear about your journey. How did you start your journey into the plant-based lifestyle?
That is a pretty long story, and I'll shorten it. A few years ago, my mom succumbed to pancreatic cancer in a very short period of time. And less than a year later, my brother developed cancer and my sister developed cancer. And we are very close. They both fought and came over, got through their cancers. They're both 10 years post-cancer right now. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But during the time that we were each dealing with the shock of the next sibling getting this disease when nobody had cancer in the family that we knew of before, I started looking at research in how can we prevent cancer instead of how do we treat cancer. I had not really put much emphasis in my practice or in my own personal thinking box about this because my job was to evaluate patients and find it early. Find it early. That was my main thing. All my training up to that point was, if there was any prevention training, it was more like, still called find it early. That's why we did mammograms. And check the cholesterol, and if it's super, super high, you had to do something. But it wasn't about trying to change the lifestyle so that it would never happen in the first place. So that's where I started looking at was prevention. In addition, my sister, who had been dealing with breast cancer of a pretty severe nature, was also asking me about, well, is there anything I can do naturally that would also help with the radiation, with the chemo? Because she was really struck with the chemo. And that's when I actually found P. Colin Campbell's book. Now, the same time this was going on, this is why the world is so amazing. This is why I believe there is a sovereign God in this universe. I have a patient, and you may know this story already, a couple of you, but I have a patient and her husband who'd been my patients forever. They came in, they were due for their cholesterol recheck. They had drawn their blood. They came in to see me, and they were early, and they were so excited, and they say, tell us what our cholesterol is. And it was fabulous. It was fabulous. And I was really surprised and delighted. And I asked them, okay, so what are you doing different? I see that you've got your, simvastatin 40 milligrams, and you've got your simvastatin 10 milligrams. So what else are you doing? And then they looked at each other, and they were in their 60s, and they started giggling, and they said, we're not taking any cholesterol pills at all. And I thought, oh, I heard that wrong. But they said, we want you to watch this video. And they handed me a video, and it was forks over knives. So I watched that video. I called them back, and I said, I'm very impressed by all this research that I just got to see on this, public dissemination movie project. I had no idea there was even a sort of an underground of information, people looking for answers and getting the information to each other. This was all something outside of my realm. So that was my first step. I had just found T. Colin Campbell's information about cancer, And then my patients introduced me to Forks Over Knives within a very short period of time. And there was T. Colin Campbell. He was one of the stars of the show. So that's when I started really delving into it. I dropped my personal story. I did drop dairy almost immediately, and I lost 12 pounds. That was a surprise. Oh, I was significantly heavier at that time than I am now. And then I dropped chicken, mostly because I don't like chicken. That was the main reason. It was like, oh, that's an easy one. And ultimately, I even left my personal favorite, which is fish. So I found that my arthritis got better. My weight went to an ideal body weight of BMI in the right range, which it probably had not done since high school. And I'm past 60. So that was a pretty cool thing. I was impressed with how I felt. I was impressed with my energy level, and it wasn't a big difficulty for me to, even before many of those changes had started, to start talking with my patients and to say, what do you know about this? How do you eat now? I was not asking my patients what they ate. I was never asking them anything other than, do they smoke and how much do they drink alcohol, which are important also. Let's not get away from that. But it wasn't part of my gestalt of a patient to even consider how poorly they were eating, unless they were morbidly obese.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful story. So it's safe to say that you didn't catch any of that information in medical school, in any of your training. Lifestyle and nutrition really weren't part of your education.
I actually did know about the DASH diet.
Oh.
And because my own cholesterol was extraordinarily high, I had some interest in that. But everything I read said that people who followed the DASH diet had a marginal decrease of their LDL cholesterol. It really was marginal. It wasn't like profound. And so I was never very impressed, and I'm still not. The DASH diet itself is fascinating because in one of the anecdotes I heard from Dr. Michael Greger's information, he describes one of the people that was on the committee that implemented the DASH diet. They actually found that a plant-based diet was much better than what they recommended, but they said, we're never going to be able to get people to subscribe to the idea of a plant-based diet. We've got to include some of the meat and the dairy, because otherwise people won't do it.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that too. Mm-hmm. Well, so from your own personal discovery, how did you make the link then to cooking without oil? What took you to that next step?
That took longer. I'm one of the people who knew how important it was to pour a teaspoon, a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons. We have a lot of onions. You have to have plenty of that sizzle going on. I had 4 children in the home, and we were busy, and we did a lot of cooking at home, and I like to cook ahead. So it was very common for myself or one of my kids to have the assignment of, you're going to make this recipe tonight. And no, you've never made it before, but it always starts with oil and vegetables in the pan. Probably not until about a year and a half ago did I really decide that extra oil made a difference in enough of my patients' lives that it probably would make a difference in my own life. And I wasn't even trying to push people that hard at that time. But you guys are also familiar with some of the information from Dr. John McDougall, I'm sure. And in some of the information that he has shared, not to mention a few chefs in that line, they described that not only can you cook without oil, you're better off to cook without oil. And if you can get your oil from your walnuts, your seeds, your avocado, things that are naturally rich in those very good oils, that it's much better. Well, that goes right along with whole food plant-based, which is where I was leaning the whole time. And I just hadn't figured out that people could really do it. So I had to be taught, exactly like I'm asking my patients to learn how to do. And that was probably less than 2 years ago.
Wow. So how are your patients adapting? Are they able to see the benefit like you're describing?
I will say that well, two things. My practice has changed just less than a year ago. So I had a very, very, very busy practice with minimal time to talk about the important stuff. We had to talk about the essentials only, refill my medicine, and get the referral. That was until about last June. At the beginning of June, I have a new practice style, and I have time to talk to my patients, which is absolutely wonderful. But that's when I've actually started really educating. I believe it has made a difference in many patients, but I can't give you any numbers. I will say that there's a few patients who come back and say, I didn't realize it was so easy. And that's always fun.
Wonderful. So they don't find it as daunting as other people might believe that it would be.
No, but the harder part seems to be they're expecting that flavor of either crisping or the flavor or the simmering thing. So you have to get used to actually tasting the food, which is okay. I don't mind telling people, yeah, get used to tasting the food. Same as cutting back on salt. It is the same exact process. Get where you have gotten used to not having oil in everything. And suddenly when you're at a restaurant and they bring you these beautiful vegetables, it's hard to eat them unless you like dot them with a napkin to get some of the extra grease off of them. It's a shame because there's some really good restaurants out there. You have to know what to ask for.
Exactly. So what do your children think about it? And perhaps your husband, did they make the transition pretty easy?
So my children are all omnivores, and I have two of my children, let's say three for the moment. I just found out last night, I have a daughter in Oklahoma. She told me that she's been doing plant-based for the last 6 weeks. And she didn't even tell me, and she's having a wonderful time. So they've been eating plant-based when I'm cooking, and when they're following a recipe for me, they eat plant-based sometimes just because it's easy, and they know how easy it is to throw a potato or a sweet potato or whatever it is, or get some hummus and get you this and that. And it's so easy to do it. So they can do it kind of naturally, and they usually keep things in the refrigerator that make it easy in case I come visit, that I don't have any trouble. But I know that at least a couple of my kids, there's no issue with them going to eat fast food, and it is exactly the same fast food as the rest of America is eating right now too, as well as coming to my house and having a big salad and cooked kale and all kinds of other yummy food that we prepare. But they'll help me chop the vegetables. They'll help me saute without oil. They know how to do everything, and sometimes they do it. And my kids are actually very encouraging to me, even if the ones that are complete omnivores.
So there's hope. My children ate this way at home while they didn't have their own driver's license and cars, without any question. And they get out and they do their own thing, and they find their own food. So there's hope that of some tunnel, they'll just catch on, that they know this is really the right way to do it.
Well, my kids have to put up with me having more energy when I eat well, so they get it.
So the patients who have taken on your concept of a whole food plant-based diet, and especially the ones who've embraced the no oil, is that what they say too? They have more energy and they feel better, and are they getting rid of their medications? Is that what you're seeing?
Actually, for the cholesterol, I had two conversations today. One was a patient, the other one was calling back to tell them about their breakdown of their cholesterol. Both conversations were a lot of fun. One lady had already been plant-based. She had very recently, like less than 4 weeks ago when I had her in the office the last time, she had just started trying to cook without oil. And so I saw her today in follow-up. So that was really timely for today's talk tonight. And she feels like she can taste when the oil is in the food better. She didn't say she was losing weight, and we were talking about the fact that since she's exercising, maybe some of her weight was more muscle, and I hope so. But she was already encouraged because she's able to notice an increase in her ability to taste food better without as much oil, and she's really being good about it. At the same time, I talked to a gentleman on the telephone. I was congratulating him on how much his small dense LDL had dropped, even though the rest of his numbers hadn't changed much. The worst of the worst had dropped. And it was because his wife had started instituting a low oil, not just plant-based. I was really, really excited. And this is a gentleman who also goes and eats fast food when his wife's not looking. I know that. So it made a difference. It made a difference that I could see in his cholesterol numbers, and that my patient could see in how well she was able to taste food.
Interesting. So don't you almost want to make a study out of that? Don't you want to just
I could figure out how to make
tell the world?
I believe that is something that could be done, but I would have to have some help on making parameters that if you can measure it, then you can study it. If it's otherwise, it's all anecdotally based, like I just gave you.
Right. Well, so when you teach people how to start this, what do you tell them? I saw in your video, you gave some steps about how to get started. But what do you say to your patients when they come in and they're just thinking, I could never cook without oil?
Okay, I do ask them. I really do ask them to go online, and I'll usually, while they're sitting with me, they see my computer screen while we're sitting together. I'll say, here's a couple of websites, and then I copy and paste the website they can get into the portal at my office so that they can link on it from my office. And I'll put a couple websites in there. The Forks Over Knives has a nice blog on oil-free cooking. Oh gosh, I'm not going to tell you all of them because I'm not an advertisement today. I probably should put a list. If there's a link we can put later, can we list some links at the bottom of the video? I don't know how this works, but maybe you can do that. But I'll actually show them a couple. I'll grab and paste links so that the patients can grab that themselves later. And then if we actually have some time, I'll let them see what the steps are for going from pan frying to oil-free sauteing, to going from baking with having oil all over and in everything, to just using either water or vegetable broth or a dry roast for certain vegetables. There's a lot you can do. So I'll let them see that for different kinds of cooking that they're used to using oil in, it's really possible to do. I almost always tie that. This is not part of this set of instructions, but I almost always tie that to saying, oh, by the way, you can also, if you happen to love baking, you can substitute a mixture of chia seed and ground flax with water and use that for an egg substitute, which is a good binder. And so I'll try to tell them, I want to find out what my patients are interested in with their particular cooking style. Do they mostly like to bake stuff? And many baked foods contribute to obesity, even if they're very healthy foods, just because we tend to eat so much because they're so yummy. But many foods that are roasted in the oven have used a tremendous amount of oil in all these recipes, and that's so easily avoided. It's incredibly easily avoided. So I will actually let them Google with me a little bit, and then I'll also just give them the basics. If they've never practiced it before, I will say, why don't you do this tonight? And then you can call me tomorrow the next day and say if you ruined your pan or if you actually got to eat that food. And I do challenge my patients in the office all the time.
That's wonderful. Do you recommend parchment paper?
I have parchment paper. I probably don't. I have the mats that are, I guess they're silicone mats, and that's what I use. And they show the patina of age. I think my son uses my parchment paper more than I do because he doesn't like to scrub those mats afterward.
I go through a lot of parchment paper.
Yeah,
so what do you find?
Easy. I could do that. Yeah,
it's a good product. So what do you find is their biggest obstacle? What makes them the most nervous about trying this?
I don't think they're nervous about trying it. I think they would prefer to eat out. I think it's too easy to get junk food. If they just cooked at home, even with the olive oil, they'd be getting less grease than if they ate out. So that's my biggest obstacle for my patients, is getting them to find a venue, and in their home is the safest and best one where they actually know what they're eating. So almost all of them say, yeah, I could use less, or I could use a spray. When they say, can I really do this without the oil? They're usually willing to try it. I don't really see that much difficulty. But it's just so easy to not cook nowadays.
Right.
That's what I see.
Definitely. So what are some of your favorite recipes? What would you lead your patients to begin cooking if they aren't really a cook?
Well, I have I have a special recipe in my house, and my kids know this one real well. It's called What We Have. It means let's look in the fridge, start chopping, and throw it in the pan. And I'll usually have my Instant Pot cooking some kind of brown rice or red rice. I'll usually already have a pot of beans somewhere, or I have some hummus, and I'm usually sauteing whatever the vegetables are that I have. We will then use some corn tortillas, or we'll have just a plate with several different things, and there's always a salad. But pretty much we eat a lot of onion, garlic, and mushrooms, like very routinely, that are sauteed without oil. Those are pretty much staples. And then depending on who's eating, there might be a lot of carrots, or there might be a lot of squash. If somebody says, oh, I'm worried about fitting into something next week or whatever, then it's going to be more squash because they feel free with that one. So it depends. And I could say what my kids probably like the best would be things that have just extra spice with, again, whatever the vegetables are we have. We eat a lot of sweet potatoes. We eat a lot of rice and beans. And we eat more kale than anyone else except maybe. We also eat untold amounts of broccoli and salad and radishes, and we have radishes in the garden in the back right now.
I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. So you have, I was just going to ask, that's one of my questions. Do you have a garden? Sorry.
So, yes.
Please.
Oh, no, it's fine. I do. I have a little square foot gardening in the backyard, which is so much fun. I wasn't able to have a garden for several years. This is the first year I've had a garden through the summer and now into the fall. And it's mostly herbs. And I have some mustard greens and some kale. And, let's see. I've got parsley. I've got some couple kinds of lettuces that I lost the package, so I don't know what they are, but I'm eating them. And I just nip them when they're small. And I think I've got a couple of big rosemary plants now. And then I'm still pulling out carrots. The carrots are getting really tough. So I need to just get rid of those carrots and replant that area. But there's going to be some onions going in there, and besides the radishes, and we're going to get some garlic in there as soon as I get a little bit busier.
Wonderful. So there are things we can be growing right now in the winter here. We're lucky to be in Texas.
We are very fortunate to be in Texas. Probably anybody who's done gardening is better at it than I am. So the things that I named are things that are hard to kill.
Maybe I should try those. Maybe I could actually do something with those. Well, we have a couple of calls from our listeners, so I'll get to these as well. So Lynn asks, as a way to get started, do you recommend the food services for patients to get their pre-made meals as a way to make it easy to get the healthy meals to cook at home? Like maybe purple carrot or Go Fresh, or there are several different ones. Do you recommend those?
I would love, if it gets people to do the chopping in the kitchen, I would love them to do it, even if I disagree with all the ingredients. I'll tell you my own experiment. I subscribed to HelloFresh for about 3 months in order to see what it was like. And I went with their vegetarian meals. I gave the cheese away to everybody. I gave the sour cream away to everybody. I found that my son would go and to the neighbor and say, I'd like that Parmesan and I'd like that sour cream back, please. So every single meal, save one, had cheese in it because they figured that you have to have the cheese. But they also had everything else that you can have, and it was a lot of fun. And I made some new recipes that I would never have made. Did not miss throwing the cheese away at all. But again, I don't like the fact that it seems less efficient, but the simplicity of it was very, very good. And the fact that it was right there, and then I had 3 bags in my refrigerator, I had to go ahead and cook those or else they were going to go bad. So I learned from it. I liked it. In fact, I loved it. And I gave them a lot of feedback as I closed my 3 months and said, when you guys have a vegan version, I'm going to probably come back for a while because I loved it when I would tell my son, pick this bag. I already took the cheese out and let's make something. And so we really had a lot of fun. As far as the other ones that you named, I haven't really researched them at all, but we cook a whole lot anyway. We don't really need that service, but I still enjoyed it very much because it let me see new recipes and get to try new things.
Right.
I recommend people do that if it's affordable to you and you are going to be able to get good use of it. Please do it, even if there's products and ingredients that you know you're not going to use. Every single recipe called for olive oil in the pan, every single one for the Hello Fresh. And that's nothing against them because they're trying to make it possible for people to cook at home who would not have any reason not to use the olive oil because they don't know better.
Right.
Maybe we need to have a low oil, a low oil, plant-based whole food such thing. And perhaps there is already one that I'm not aware of. And maybe that's one with the purple carrot. I have no idea.
Well, Purple Carrot offers vegan options,
Okay.
but they still had some oil in there. You had to come up with it yourself. That was
Yeah, they do for this too, sure.
But at least there were vegan options, so you didn't have to worry about cheese or sour cream or any dairy that would be in there. Yes. But it's a good option, I guess, for some people that's still a step in the right direction. So good advice. So another listener asks or says, we hear all the time how heart healthy oil is. What is wrong with oil? So give us the synopsis of why oil is bad for us.
I'll give you the part that I can easily remember without having any notes in front of me. All right. Number one, let's talk about coconut oil for just a minute. Coconut oil has, it's oil for one thing. It's not the coconut itself. And it is actually quite processed. And it's really good for your skin, but it's really good to put on the outside of your skin. When you eat it, you're consuming 125 calories per tablespoon, I believe. And it is going to take the space that a better food probably could take. Oils in general, even the ones that are liquid at room temperature, such as olive oil, canola oil, grapeseed oil, peanut oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, walnut oil. I mean, you can find gazillions of them nowadays. They are all extracted products, some cold pressed, some extracted with formaldehyde. However they're extracted, even if they're crushed, as they did in the early Bible days or the ancient whatever days, they're still an extracted product, and you're missing everything else that came with whatever it came from. So one of my recommendations to my patients, I highly, highly recommend the book Whole by T. Colin Campbell, which explains how much is present in a whole piece of fruit or plant or seed or whatever compared to when you extract any of the parts of it. So what you're having is one part, it's very calorie dense, it's very processed, and in many cases in our bodies, it will actually allow inflammation to increase. It will also contribute to fatty liver. It can also cause worsening of heartburn. I'm just thinking about things that I'm very, very, very knowledgeable about for dealing with it all the time. So arthritic conditions can do worse. And truthfully, the olive oil is so useful in our culture because it makes everything taste yummy, just like sugar and salt does. It's not really useful for our health. And I hate to be on the wrong side of all those industries, but I've given up deciding I'm not going to fight that battle. I will fight that battle. And I will say that please put your oils on the outside of your body. Don't eat them.
Good advice. So do you have some favorite websites where you would, I mean, you mentioned that you give them some links.
Oh, yes.
You show them actually in the computer, but do you have some favorite websites where you tell them to go for recipes?
I do. And in fact, I have my own favorite ones, and those are the ones I tend to share with my patients. Mm-hmm. They are not all spectacularly low salt or low oil necessarily, but I think everybody needs to be a wise consumer when they're on any website, no matter what. But if they find recipes through forks over knives, I don't know if this shows up backwards or forwards. I can't tell what you guys are seeing. Forks over knives, they have both an app with recipes, and they have a cookbook, and they have a weekly to your mailbox that will have recipes, which are usually very, very doable. I mean, they're reachable recipes. I love theirs. I recommend many of my patients to find out more about 22-Day Revolution, or from Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. They have a 21-day vegan kickstart. It's not completely low oil, but it's a big change. It's like a huge change compared to what the standard American diet is. And just getting started in that direction makes people so much more aware of what they're eating, so that I don't have any problem if, when they're starting, let's start with where you are and where we're trying to get to next, and then we'll work on the fine points. I really consider going very low oil to no oil as being not as important as getting away from some of the very harmful things that are in a non-plant-based diet.
Right. Do you think the number one thing might be dairy? Is that the number one thing you'd like to see people take out?
If they're over 4 years old and they're not nursing from their own mother, I do.
Yeah.
I think dairy is very unnecessary, and I think it's actually harmful. And the older you get, the more harmful it seems to be. There are some pockets of the world where there are people that seem to tolerate eating and drinking dairy, and generations drink dairy and live long lives too. But as a group, those populations, and I'm thinking of Finland and some areas in Sweden, there's some Northern European countries where dairy is a real foundation, just like fish in certain coastal areas are very, very high. And their long-term, long-lived population isn't really that much. It's just that there's certain long-lived families there. And I think that's an interesting study too, because those are people that really do have dairy all their lives because it's one of their main foods that they have access to. So, but for most of us, first off, they can't process it well. It causes so much gastrointestinal disturbance and inflammation. Second, it is, well, I don't have to go into all the reasons why I don't think dairy is good, but I will say that that is pretty much my first chop, just like it was for myself when I'm wanting to counsel a patient. Oil, I just ask them to reduce, and then depending on what their own situation is, to go ahead and get out of the oil habit.
Gotcha. So do you have some favorite tools? I heard you say that you have an Instant Pot. I have an Instant Pot too, and I love it. Do you have other favorite tools in your kitchen?
I have some gadgets. I like gadgets. I don't have enough room. I have a smaller home this year, and I love having the efficiency of a smaller home, but I don't have the kitchen that was to die for, that was in my previous home. And so I've had to say goodbye to a few tools. But I use my Vitamix. I use my Instant Pot, if not every day, every other day. And on the every other day, I'm using it 2 or 3 times for one meal sometimes. I probably need another Instant Pot. After a long hiatus, I did get another masticating juicer. I don't really think that juicing has near the benefit of smoothies, and that's a whole topic all by itself. Smoothies and juicing, and I'm not really going to dwell on that today. But I got the juicer because I wanted to have fresh juice for one of my children who really, really likes carrot juice. And I wanted to use all the carrot pulp for some recipes that I'm enjoying. So we're getting to use both sides of that carrot. And I used to juice a long time ago just for fun, but I ended up throwing so much stuff either into the garbage or into the compost. And I felt it was pretty inefficient, and I really think it's better to chew your own food. So that's kind of a toy. That's really a toy. The other tool that I use that we're probably never going to talk about on this program is it's a food saver, so that I can keep my food much fresher, much longer. I don't like throwing things away, especially when I have vegetables. So I can use a mason jar, a quart mason jar, and I can actually fill it with as much vegetables as I want, suck most of the air out. It stays good in the fridge for many days longer, and I reuse those. I don't have to throw away a baggie every single time. So for me, that's very rewarding. I don't have as much waste in my kitchen on both ends. I don't throw the trash away, and I don't throw the parts of the spoiled vegetables away. I used to throw away a lot of vegetables.
So you can use food saver in a jar.
There's a little attachment for mason jars. Yeah, it's cool. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, Lynn asks, and her question may be very similar to what we're just talking about, but she says, in a time of disruptive technologies, even when it comes to cooking, is there any disruptive technology in cooking that you would recommend that we might add to our households?
It depends on where you're starting. Oh, Lynn, I love your question. So disruptive technology to me implies that it's giving you an opportunity to do something you've never done before. That could be something as simple as a microtome for being able to zest a lemon. That would be disruptive if you've, in the past, always scraped your knuckles when you've tried to zest a lemon. Or maybe you said, who zests a lemon except a chef? Anybody can with a little tool. Okay, so that's one. Because when you're putting lemon zest and then you're squeezing the lemon into your food, you do not have to use a calorie-rich vinaigrette or high sugar, low fat dressing. You can use your own ingredients to put on your salad or on your broccoli or whatever it is. So that little thing, that's a great tool. To me, having an Instant Pot, that's disruptive technology. I have a pressure cooker. I can, I'm not sure exactly how many pints or quarts in my pressure cooker. But I will tell you, oh my goodness, I can see Caroline is showing me her microtome or her grater with a lemon up in the corner. Thank you, Caroline. So my Instant Pot. Microplane. See, I don't know. A microtome, if it's a cell for looking at under the microscope. Yeah, that's what I don't know. Yeah, the technology exists. Thank you. So microplane. But to me, the Instant Pot allows me to do things on a very small scale or a little bit larger scale in a fraction of the time. I have never, ever, ever cooked beans in my enormous pressure cooker because it's a canner and it stays in the garage all the time unless I have too many green beans. But this Instant Pot, I can cook breakfast. I can cook 2 things for lunch at the same time I'm cooking breakfast practically. And I have saved myself thinking about fast food, having to worry about skipping lunch again, or having something much less nutritious, because this way I know exactly what I've got. So that for me, because there's so many things that I can do with my Instant Pot, and I mostly use it for electric pressure cooking, but I have used it for several other things too. I got to tell you that I have never yet done the sweet rice. It's a special dessert that I did learn how to make a gazillion years ago in a macrobiotic classroom. And if anyone has had experience making the sweet rice, it's actually slightly fermented. And I don't really recommend that as a routine, but if it's for a very special occasion, somebody getting married or something like that, that might be fun to do in the Instant Pot. I've never tried it yet. That's one thing that's in my recipe book that I'm probably going to practice.
Wonderful. I love my Instant Pot. So a couple more questions have come in. One from Peter. He says, on a very different topic, have you seen anything on lifestyle and food to prevent and reverse a hiatal hernia? Do you have any experience with that?
So I have some experience with dietary measures to reduce the symptoms of a hiatal hernia. A hiatal hernia is actually an anatomic condition where your diaphragm allows more of the stomach to rise above the diaphragm, so that any extra pressure on the abdomen can cause food to push at the top of the stomach, and many, many times it will cause painful, painful heartburn, often associated with a lower esophageal sphincter pressure or how big the esophagus bottom can open into the stomach. So it's a heartburn condition. It's a pressure in the tummy, in the chest condition. It's very, very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And it's anatomic, so you're not going to fix it with a diet, but you can reduce the symptoms of it dramatically with less oil, or no oil, with certain spices which are not the same for everyone. Oddly enough, some people can tolerate all kinds of interesting spices, and some people can tolerate almost nothing. And they have the same apparent anatomic condition. And it's just what their esophagus tolerates, apparently. But what I find with my patients that go plant-based, almost all of them notice a significant leaner self over a period of weeks to months. And so they lose abdominal fat. That's the fat that most people want to lose. Nobody really cares too much. Well, women don't really care as long as they can fit their jeans. Men don't care, except that they want to see their toes, you know, if they look down. So that Dunlap's disease can be a problem. But if you have sleep apnea, if you have an anatomic problem like a hiatal hernia, that abdominal fat is putting pressure. And when you lie down at night, it's smothering you, and it's smothering you more if you have a hiatal hernia. So losing abdominal fat makes the symptoms much, much better. And that would be, Peter, a real benefit of a plant-based diet, because people automatically seem to become leaner, and especially in the abdominal fat.
Thank you, Dr. McCree.
Mm-hmm.
So Jean has a question too. She says, it seems like there's always a ton of oil in our food when we go out to eat. Do you have any tips for eating out?
I get occasionally invited to eat at a very popular nearby seafood restaurant, a very popular nearby steak restaurant, and a Mexican restaurant. I am learning enough Spanish to say no aceite, por favor. And I'm learning to talk to the chef before ordering in a restaurant where people come to you to actually take your order. So some Mexican restaurants are, by the way, they don't get it even if you have a Mexican translator to say, she doesn't want any oil. It doesn't matter. They don't know what that means anyway. They think she's crazy. She really wants oil. They don't believe you. So it's tough in a Mexican restaurant sometimes. And if somebody has a local restaurant to the general Houston area that also does some low oil cooking, I'd like to hear about it. You can find a way to get that information to me. But at the local steak and seafood restaurants, any of the sit-down restaurants, I have so many times found that there's actually a chef in the back. And when you have a special dietary need, but you're really nice about it, they are generally very happy to get to show off a little bit. And it may or may not be delightfully good, but sometimes it is fabulous. And they will do something like they may grill some vegetables without oil, and you can see they had to turn them more or whatever. They may do something with a salad when they know I don't want any oil on the salad. They may put some actual fruit in there. Nobody else got fruit in their salad. So I have had such a fun time. I won't be naming restaurants by name, but I've had very, very good success at almost every sit-down waiter comes to your restaurant. And it's simply by saying, I really can't have any cheese, and I really like no oil or the least oil possible. Are you able to do that? And then if they say no, they can't, I'll say, okay, I would like to have a glass of water with lemon in it. And then they get a little nervous, and sometimes they come out and the chef meets me then. And then he says, oh yeah, we can do that. Mushrooms, yeah, we can do that. Onions, yeah, we got that. Tomatoes, oh yeah, we got that. Oh, we have some squash. Oh, we have some. And then they start saying, yeah, I have some of this too. And then they start thinking, oh, and if you go at the not busiest time of day, sometimes you can actually, I always mention this, I say, could you put this on your menu? I'd like to get this again. And, I always give my compliments to the chef if it's something good. So don't hesitate to say thank you to a particular maitre d' or chef at a restaurant anywhere if they've done something that's out of their way and makes it easier for other people who are plant-based to get to eat there. Make it like feel like they got a real win, because it is a real win for us.
That's great. So do you ever call ahead? You definitely are very kind about asking, but do you give them a heads up and maybe a day
Yes.
or half a day ahead?
In fact, tomorrow there is someone that's bringing food to my office for lunch for our staff and for myself. And I said, could I look at the menu first? Because they usually will just cater in a bunch of food. And when we know that they have that opportunity, then I get to actually look at the menu. Well, what if there's just nothing on the menu that's a preset menu? Then I am shameless. I will call the restaurant myself and say, do you have black beans with no meat, no oil? Or do you have a salad that you can put all those things on and not add all this to? They almost always can. But it's tricky. You have to go out of your way. They have to go out of their way. And when it's catered in, it's awkward. When you're going to a restaurant elsewhere, it's super, super easy to say, I need reservations for 4. We have someone who's entirely plant-based, low oil. Do you have some options for them? And they say yes. And then when they take your name for the reservation, then you have to remind them when you get there, this is the one who's plant-based. Can you do something for them? And I usually make the other person point to me that way. Yeah.
I think that's great advice. I do the same. I use the same tricks sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's great. So when you're talking to your patients about this, do they mention that that's one of the things, like you mentioned earlier, even that they really like to eat out? So have you been able to kind of guide them in ways to manage the restaurants? It too?
There's choices that people make first on if they eat out or if they eat at home. When they decide to eat out, you want it to be a social engagement, which is just as healthy as eating healthy. So I do not push anybody trying to get other people to eat the way they're eating. Okay, I want them to enjoy their food. But as far as asking people to try to ask for a plant-based or a no cheese on it or a no oil in it, I can tell by my patients' look on their face. There are some people who say, oh yeah, new challenge accepted. Or some people that's like, I could never. So that comes more from someone inside. And that's why just being aware that you do have the choices. There are people who would never, ever ask because it wouldn't occur to them. But there's other people who won't ask even though it might occur to them. They might really want something else, but they don't have the guts to speak up. And I'll say, it's really easy. Say, I'm allergic to dairy, or I'm allergic to pork, or, you can lie. This is one of those times that I think it's okay. And theoretically, it's something that pork makes me very sick. That would probably be a pretty easy thing to say.
Mm-hmm. I do find that restaurants are on heightened alert anytime they say an allergy. So that might be a good thing to remember too.
I don't really like to be untruthful about it. I'd rather they know it was a preference, but if somebody else is trying to talk for me, I'll let them say whatever they want.
Right. Good. Well, are there other tips that you might offer to people?
Be prepared. Yes, be prepared. If it's possible to have another option at work in case you didn't get to go to lunch with your friends and then you find that you suddenly don't have lunch plans, if you've always got something that's in your fridge or your desk that you can get that is going to meet a good lunch need. I also include in that, if there's a big enough refrigerator, whether you share it with other people or not at work, and we have a big shared refrigerator area at work, always bring some cut up vegetables, always bring a cello bag of whatever your favorite green salad vegetables are, so that you can always have a big salad and pour some balsamic vinegar or squeeze some lemon on it. Always have it where you can eat something at an inopportune moment when there is no other opportunity any other time. So being prepared, it might be something as simple as keeping a few potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, whatever your rutabaga of choice is, that you could microwave and season and have for any time that you didn't get to have that, that Big Mac, or whatever that was that everybody else was having. So I have found that to be very useful. I've also found that when the refrigerator was really low, I have no problem having oatmeal with blueberries and walnuts for lunch. It's good.
Yeah. Do you like to do meal prep? Is that one of your techniques?
I have done many types of meal prep over time. I have a schedule now that permits me to pretty much cook what I like, but I almost always will try to cook 2 meals and have one for later or one that I can freeze. So it's sort of natural for me to cook bigger because I used to have a lot more people in the house. But as far as meal prep where you do like all the stuff for one whole week, I've done that more experimentally for fun. And I do find it very enjoyable. I also find I don't get to all of the food that I've prepped, and I hate throwing it away. And but still, this is like a hobby. I'm developing a skill. It's worth it. I don't regret having to throw away another dead bag of spinach that I didn't get to, because if I had been able to get that extra recipe done, it was there, it was ready, I was ready. And as it is, in the same way that when you open a particular ingredient that has to be consumed within a certain part of time, you got to use it for that first recipe. That's the whole reason you had it. If you never got to use any of the rest of it, that's okay. You got to use it for what you got it for. And for me, that was a hard thing to do. I guess you're learning more about me than you ever wanted to know. But I no longer regret throwing away the bad vegetables. I simply say, it's okay. I got to learn. I got to enjoy it the first time or whatever. And I think everybody who eats an awful lot of fresh produce has to go through that process of, oh no, another dead, name that vegetable. Or my favorite is to say, the celery has hair longer than your favorite person. So anyway, that can happen in anybody's fridge. Sure, it happens in mine. But since I now have a smaller refrigerator, I have to plan more. And that's why I don't do as much meal prep. I don't have as much room for everything too.
Gotcha. That's good advice for me, because I do worry about not using that last little bit. Okay, we have another couple of comments that are coming in. Jean says, I know someone who says, my doctor told me I have to eat this way.
Yes. I have told folks that if you eat this way, you're going to feel better. You're going to have to make a decision every single day that this is a way of eating that will give you more freedom in so many ways. If you don't eat this way, you will continue to have the same problems that you're having now. And undoubtedly, some of them are going to get worse, and certain ones will become so much worse that you'll either die, which could be any day. It could be any day for any of us, let's be honest. But at least from our eating habits, it's much more imminent than if we don't eat ourselves to death. And the symptoms that we get our aches and complaints from, those symptoms are going to get worse with our poor eating habits. And that's the thing where people say, oh, maybe it does matter. Maybe I don't have to have that neuropathy in my feet. Maybe I don't have to have that hiatal hernia and constant heartburn. I have had so many patients, when they have changed their diet, their heartburn goes away, their allergies get so much better. And these are people that, they have that chronic cough forever from Houston, but the Houston cough got better when they got off of the dairy, oddly enough. Mm-hmm. So I have to say that I don't really like to force things down people's throats, even when it's a big, important decision. I like to have people come to the realization for themselves that this is actually better for me and I want to do it. But I will say that I'm pretty blunt with folks about what their body's response is to continuing or to changing.
Good. Well, Lynn has a question. How often do you go shopping in order to keep your veggies fresh?
I go minimally, when I'm trying to be a minimalist, once a week. I have been known to go 4 times in a week, and it's like they see me coming at Kroger and here she is again. And it might actually be to get stuff for my office because my office supplies are dwindling, but once a week for sure. I always will go once a week. And then I just like to go and see if there's something that I wasn't expecting. And that didn't used to be my plan. I used to go in with a list. I feel a little bit more free now. I also love to see okay, I'm going to name a name. Is it okay if I'll ask my moderator, is it okay if I'm allowed to say the name of a grocery store?
Sure, why not?
Getting permission here. Okay.
Sure.
So there are some places, and notably Kroger, very near me, HEB, very near me, that will occasionally have markdowns on produce. Well, if you're there at exactly the right time, you might hit it when they just threw all this red wrapped produce, much of it organic, into their clearance area. And that's when I'll overstuff my refrigerator. I'll say, look at all these cucumbers, they're organic. Look at all these apples, they're organic. And I'll buy organic strawberries, I'll buy organic spinach and non-organic spinach, I'll buy both. But I do get organic when it looks really good and when it looks more affordable. I could probably afford organic much, much more than I get, but I will say that it seems to me like it's always a coup if there's something organic and it's also at a more affordable price. I just get very excited about that. That wasn't the focus of this talk tonight, and I'm not the expert on organic versus GMO and commercially raised. I do say that in my own garden, I don't use any, I use natural compost and stuff like that. I think my gardening is organic, if I were to look up what that really means. But I eat almost everything that I can find that's plant-based. I don't limit to organic.
Excellent. Well, and Lynn has another comment. Lynn says, for someone who constantly gets sick, takes antibiotics, and destroys their microbiome, how long might it take on a plant-based regime to see some positive results? Maybe getting sick less or shedding weight, etc.
That's a very good question. And the information that I most recently have brushed up on follows from a talk I heard from Dr. Clapper, Klaper. I saw him at a conference about a year ago, and I looked at his website a few times since that time. He has a vital interest in people getting their guts restored and getting their bodies restored, and especially through knowing what their microbiome has gone through and improving it. The microbiome, which is the several trillion bacteria that live in your guts and stomach lining that do a lot of work for you, they can get progressively wiped out by all those antibiotics. They can cause your gut to lose many, many, many of its functions, and then you have this slick gut, and then you get a leaky gut, and so you get indigestion, diarrhea from almost everything. With several different interventions, there's more than one thing that can be improved in as little as 3 weeks, but it probably takes closer to 8 months to get the gut back to a pretty healthy biome where it can do what it did before the last 5 antibiotics. If you're on one antibiotic for 5 days, that probably takes at least 3 months for your body to get its previous biome. And that's one of the reasons that I really try hard not to have people take antibiotics for any reason, because they're going to lose some other protections by getting that one round of antibiotics. There are times where I will insist that someone take antibiotics. I feel very strongly about treating certain things in certain ways, but I even at the same time that I'm saying you have to take this antibiotic, I don't like it, and you may not like taking it, but you are much better off for taking this antibiotic, and here's all the bad things that happen with it. So it's a very, very good question. There are so many children that are treated with antibiotic rounds over and over again. I have no idea how much we're messing up some of the things that they should be gaining ground on, that we're not giving the opportunity to digest things fully and let that biome work for those little ones. So it's a concern to me. So Dr. Clapper, Drklaper, or .org, something like that. He has much advice, and it's documented advice. He's got documentation to back up what he recommends, and you can find some of his work pretty quickly.
Super. Thank you, Dr. McCree. That was a great answer on that. Lynn, might you have any other questions or comments for Dr. McCree tonight?
Actually, I was surprised to have the number of questions that I did, but thank you, Dr. McCree. The answers were so great, and you know, for me, I live pretty healthy, but these are questions that come up from my seeing family, friends, and just in a lot of the conversations that we as the Just One Thing for Health team are in. And so I'm just really grateful that you've been here with us this evening. I'm looking at the time, and I know we committed to be in this space, so I don't want to hold you any longer. Lisa, thank you so much for being the host and such a great moderator. The questions were just excellent. Thank you to all of our guests. Dr. McCree, if there was any one thing that you would like to leave our audience with tonight, I would love for you to share that at this point in time.
Yes. Not only would I like our listeners to learn how to cook without oil, I'd like them to start asking more questions. What else? What else? What else?
Fabulous. Thank you. Yes. Important questions. What else? What else? What else? So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Peter, for this whole forum that we're moving in. We are adding to the movement of the plant-based, whole food plant-based movement. We're celebrating the movement, and we are bringing our audience wonderful doctors like Dr. Kathi McCree, who are giving you of their expertise and knowledge and their heart and passion around having a plant-based diet and living a plant-based lifestyle. And we want you to live your best life and pass that on. Let others know what we're doing here. Invite others to join us for our next call, which, by the way, we have the amazing Dr. Pam Popper, who's going to actually address some additional information on the microbiome. So join us next week and keep an eye out for our next email. Dr. Kathi, we're going to have more questions coming in, so we're going to invite you to our Facebook page so that if you're available and can answer any of these questions around oil-free cooking, we'd love for you to do that. Once again, Lisa, thank you so much. And to our audience, good night for tonight, and we'll see you back here again next week. Bye for now.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Dr. McCree. Good night.